Everybody and their mother wants to challenge Ben Askren to a wrestling match, and that includes this guy who may go into MMA fighting in a couple years. That guy's name is Bo Nickal. So let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. Hello wrestling fans and welcome to the Fanco Wrestling Show. My name's Josiah, and on this show I talk all about wrestling news. On the off season, this is going to be a bi-weekly show, but I'm going to talk about so much fun stuff. And just to let you guys know, if you are wrestling fans, then you know the importance of looking great on and off the mat. Lucky for you, I have a whole t-shirt line that I designed, including this month's t-shirt of the month. Make sure to check it out in the description below. It's a great way to help support this show while also looking stylish right off the mat. And in this week's show, we're talking all about so many awesome things going on in the offseason, including this. Bo Nickal won the Hodge Trophy. So this is a little bit old news, but Bo Nickal is the Hodge Trophy winner. And let's take a look at, who these Hodge Trophy contenders were, whether Bo Nickal, whether he deserved to win it or not. So the Hodge Trophy contenders were, of course, Bo Nickal, Jason Nolf, Anthony Ashnault, and Yianni Diakomihalis. Two of those guys, Penn Staters. The other two guys, Ashnault from Rutgers and Yianni from Cornell. So these are were the four candidates, and fans were asked to vote on who would win the Hodge Trophy, but of course this ended up coming down to a committee decision in Bo Nickal winning that title. So the criteria for this, in case you aren't really that familiar with the Hodge, it's a lot of people get confused and think it's actually an OW, like the outstanding wrestler of the tournament, of the national tournament, but that's not the case at all. It's actually a culmination of the entire year of wrestling, and that takes into account pins, wins, bonus points, as well as like sportsmanship, citizenship, past credentials, and the last criteria is heart. So those all go into deciding the Hodge Trophy. Now let's go through these four contenders and see whether Bo actually deserved to win or not. So in the fourth place for the fan vote was Yianni Diakomihalis. Yianni was at 141 pounds this past year at Cornell. He was 29-0. Now he had 7 pins on the year. He had 5 major decisions, 7 tech falls, and then he had actually all of his matches he had 59% bonus point victory. So that's pretty good. But this next guy did a little bit better, and that is Anthony Ashnault. So Ashnault from Rutgers. He actually came in second place for the fan vote, but he was 32-0. So out of all these guys, he had the most wins. He had 8 pins, 4 tech falls, 7 major decisions, and he also had a 59% bonus point victory. So very close with Yianni. And then was Jason Nolf. Now he actually came in third place with the fan vote, and we never know, who's second, third, and fourth in the committee vote. But Jason Nolf, third in the fan vote. He wrestled 157 pounds, 4 Penn State. He was 31-0, so 1 win off of Ashnault. And of course, you probably know, these guys are all national champions. He had 15 pins. He had 5 tech falls, 6 major decisions, and 87% of his matches were won by bonus point victory. That's just unreal to me. And then, of course, in first place in the fan vote and the committee vote was Bo Nickal, who was 30-0. He had 18 pins, 3 tech falls, 6 major decisions, and he won 90% of his matches by bonus point victory. So, did he deserve to win? I think the choice is pretty obvious here by the end of the season. I think Ashnault really he had a great year, and arguably, out of all these guys, he may have even had a more impressive year because of his quality of wins, which is another factor that's taken into consideration, because he had wins over 2 #1 guys in Kolodzik and in Jordan from Ohio State. So he had really great wins, but overall, Bo Nickal won. And this is actually, fun fact for you, Penn State has won 5 out of the last 8 Hodge Trophies. Of course, the other guys who won it were Zane Rutherford, he won it 2 times, and David Taylor, who also won it 2 times. And really, you make a strong point that Jason Nolf could have also won it this year, and if he was just a junior and was wrestling again next year, he could have won it next year. And now, who do you think will win the Hodge Trophy next year? That's the big question I have. I think it could be up to a couple of these guys, possibly Yanni. He's the only guy who's returning here and has a very strong chance of winning. But on to the next topic today, which is one of those Hodge Trophy winners. Bo Nickel is thinking about going into MMA. And I thought this was pretty fantastic because he announced this, all this crazy stuff came out about Bo right after the national championships. First, of course, the day after he won the title at 197 pounds, Bo challenged Ben Askren to a match, just out of nowhere. And this kind of goes into one of our later discussions of whether, everybody in their name is challenging Ben Askren to a wrestling match. But Bo Nickel, he made the decision that next year he's actually going to do the Olympics and then possibly do MMA. He actually told ESPN, quote, "The plan is to do the Olympics in 2020, then start fighting." Now, this is a guy who I never really thought would go into the MMA. I mean, to me, he doesn't necessarily look like your typical MMA fighter. I picture a big, massive, muscular guy. A Miles Martin, he has more of a build of an MMA fighter than Bo Nickel. But, of course, we all know Bo is the greatest college wrestler this past year. So he in wrestling is one of the main skills in MMA, obviously. So what do you guys think? Do you think Bo has a chance at doing well? We've seen other Penn Staters do well and other wrestlers do well in Bellator, in the UFC. A couple of those guys who've done well in Bellator, for example, you have Bob Jenkins, Phil Davis, as well as Ed Ruth. And I actually saw Phil Davis and Ed Ruth fight at Bellator at State College at the Bryce Jordan Center, which was phenomenal to see. They won both of their matches. They won, which was great. And it gives a lot of guys on the current team some, future looking to think about whether they want to fight. And another guy who may go into this is Anthony Cassar. So Cassar was another guy who said he's very interested in going into MMA. And you know what? MMA is not the only career path for wrestlers right after they're done with college wrestling. And that's one topic of discussion I wanted to think about today is where can wrestlers go after, college wrestling is done? Because there's no official pro wrestling. Of course, you have the fake amateur stuff or the fake stuff, but, there's no real pro wrestling. So, one interesting thing is they could go into another sport. Think about football, NFL. We have a couple guys who are just big and massive. And actually, Bill O'Brien, who's the Bills head coach, was looking at Anthony Cassar. The Houston Texans head coach. Got my Bills mixed up. He said Houston Texans head coach was actually looking at Anthony Cassar, and he was looking, he's talked to Cale Sanderson, he's been in the room a couple times, and think Cassar could be a good lineman. So, not only do you have MMA, UFC, Bellator, but you also have NFL. Another thing that you could do to make money after wrestling is the Olympics. So the Olympics, actually, if you bring home a gold medal, even a silver or bronze, the U.S., they'll pay you. They'll pay you for that medal. So that's actually, a gold medal is actually worth $37,000. And then a silver, you'll earn $22,000 and $15,000 for bronze. So that's, that's a nice chunk of change. However, for all that training, you go through years of training and you get, maybe a year's salary for that. Now, if you bring home a couple golds, yeah, you're going to bring home more money. But, that's another career path. Now, of course, you have that eternal glory, but that's that. Now, another aspect that you could go into is, of course, the WWE. So these guys like Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, they take home salaries anywhere from, $200,000 for the lowest paid guys up to like 12, 13, 14, 15 million dollars salary. They can get paid $1 million in a night for these fights that they do, which is crazy. And we've seen guys like a Kurt Angle go into from college wrestling to WWE and make a great living for himself and a great name for himself. And then, of course, what do UFC fighters get paid? What do the MMA fighters get paid? Well, if you're looking for a Bellator, they're going to get paid, anywhere from a few, a couple thousand to a few 100,000 for the big fights. But then you're looking at UFC, in that fight, whenever Ben Askren fought a couple months ago, he made 350,000 just for that one night of fighting. And then you got the big guys who are making, even if they lose, they're making a couple 100,000, which is a great aspect to go into. So let me know what you guys think about this. What do you think is the best career path to go into after college wrestling? Where would you like to see some of these guys go? Would you like to see Kassar go into the NFL? Would you like to see Bo go into the MMA? Would you like to see Anthony Ashnall go into the Olympics? Let me know what you think in the comments below. On to the next topic of the day. Ben Askren versus Jordan Burroughs. It's happening at Beat the Streets, upcoming in May. This is going to be the match to watch, the match of the year. Now, before I get into, Jordan Burroughs versus Askren, everybody and their mother was going after Ben Askren. So first, when Bo Nickel, right after he won the national championships this past year, he challenged Ben Askren just to a wrestling match, not at Beat the Streets or anything. He just said, he added Askren on Twitter. He said, "Hey, Ben, let's wrestle." And this picked up a lot of response from a lot of news outlets that wanted to see this match happen. So there's nothing really that came out of that. But then what happened is Dylan Danis, who is an MMA Bellator fighter, he challenged Ben Askren on Twitter, and he said, "Hey, Ben, if you don't accept this fight within 24 hours, then I automatically win. You forfeit. I'm a winner, and I beat Askren in a wrestling match." And this kind of brought up a lot of debate in whether this was even warranted. Should he have even challenged Askren to a match? What is Danis's career, like how well has he even done in wrestling in the past? And from my digging, from my understanding, he qualified for the state tournament, and that's about as far as he got. Then he went into MMA and he makes a living on Bellator, but that was that. And then we had Jordan Burroughs challenge him, who said, "Should Askren and I wrestle?" He put out a Twitter poll. The fans, of course, voted yes. If you voted no, I don't know why you would vote no to not see Burroughs and Askren wrestling. That's going to be a great match. But these two guys are wrestling at the Grapple at the Garden at Madison Square Garden, the Hulu Theater, in May. So this will be happening May 6th. You can watch it live on Flow. Now, what is Beat the Streets? Well, Beat the Streets is a match or a tournament or match that's been going on for many years, where it brings together a lot of guys for these big matches, super matches essentially, and raises money. The wrestling is secondary almost, and the big part is raising money for these kids that may not be able to afford all the wrestling and all the coaches and camps, and puts money back into the kids on the streets, to keep them off of the streets and to get them on the mat and to keep them wrestling. So what are the big things happening this year? Well, after last year's slippery mat fiasco, of course you may remember, with Burroughs versus Frank Chamizo, well, the mats were outside and they just were crazy slippery. But this year it's inside at the Hulu Theater, and Askren and Burroughs will be fighting. Now, these two guys are former NCAA wrestling champions, and they took kind of slight different career paths. Burroughs, of course, went into Olympic wrestling. He has a lot of sponsorships, camps, does really well with that. Askren went into Bellator. He had a nice UFC fight a couple months ago where he's making some cash. Well, these two are coming back to wrestle each other. Now, if you didn't know, Burroughs is a wrestler from Nebraska and Askren from Missouri. They're both Hodge Trophy winners, which I thought was, pretty darn cool. Now, this is essentially the Funk versus the Blast double. Who will win this? Let me know in the comments below who you think will win this crazy super match this year. My bet is on Burroughs, and that's only because, Askren's been off the wrestling mat for a couple of years. He hasn't wrestled all that much. And of course there's wrestling in MMA, but he hasn't been grinding it out on the mat as hard as Burroughs has been. Now, maybe I'm not seeing his training and I'm wrong about that, but that's just my thoughts on that. Please let me know what you think below. But what are the other matches happening at the Grapple at the Garden? Well, after, of course, we have Burroughs and Askren, but then we also have James Green versus Anthony Ashnall. Now, these are both New Jersey natives, and they're coming at it to wrestle each other. Ashnall, of course, is this past year's NCAA champion at 149 pounds, undefeated, Hodge contender. Now, he was the first 4-time New Jersey state champion. So he was also undefeated in high school. He was a Big Ten champ this past year, national champ, did really well, and now he's looking to wrestle James Green, who is also a New Jersey guy. He's an All-American, Big Ten champ, and a 2-time world medalist. So he's also a New Jersey state champ. So it's the matchup of New Jersey versus New Jersey, and we've seen New Jersey growing phenomenally over this past year. They did really well at the Big Ten tournament and at nationals, and I'm excited to see these two guys face off. And there's one other big match that has been announced. There may be others that haven't been announced yet, but one other big match that's been announced for high school commits is Jojo Aragona, who's the #1 kid in the country at his weight class. He is another New Jersey state champ and a Rutgers commit. So this will be great to see a new Rutgers commit coming in here, as well as one leaving Rutgers in Asheville, and seeing what the future holds for the program. Then he is facing off against Adam Buscello, who's #4 in the country, who is a 5-time New York state champion. And he's, this will be a great match to watch. Beat the Streets always has a pretty good high school matchup, and it'll be fun to see how all these guys do. Now, you can watch Beat the Streets live on Flow on May 6th. Make sure that you guys check it out. This past year, there have been some controversial rule changes, and the biggest thing, of course, was hands to the face. And although this wasn't a direct rule change in the rule book, this has sparked some debate because at the beginning of the season, the refs got together. They said in the scoring committee, the ruling committee, they said we need to really watch hands to the face, make sure it's not egregious. And really, I didn't think the hands to the face was egregious this year. It was the calls that were egregious, because they were just calling all these crazy things out. But what will happen next year? What are 2 potential rule changes for next year for the upcoming season in 2019 and 2020? There are 2. One, and they are looking at hands to the face, so that will be hopefully a change. The other things, first of all, is a no headgear rule. So it's a potential that there may not be mandatory headgear this upcoming season. And this had a lot of debate going on after the Nick Suriano versus Dayton Fix match. And of course, if you remember, Dayton Fix shot in on Suriano in overtime in the national finals. Suriano had his hand on his headgear, and it looked like he pulled it. I'll leave it up to you guys. The ref said no, it was no pull. John Smith thought it was a pull. Dayton Fix did too. And he got the takedown. Nick Suriano won the national title. But why should there be headgear or no headgear? Well, the big thing is, if there was no headgear there, there would have been nothing to even worry about. Would he have pulled his hair? Well, then you got a call there. But why is headgear mandatory now? Well, one that people may say is like a concussion protocol, and I really don't think there are any wrestlers saying that. It's more of the governing body of the NCAA who's saying, yeah, they need to wear, like in football, you need to wear helmets for concussions. Well, that makes a little bit more sense. But in wrestling, how much impact is a headgear really absorbing? I don't know. Another thing is cauliflower ear, really protecting that. But half the guys that are wrestling have cauliflower ear anyway. So I think this is a pretty good rule change. Whether a guy wants to wear headgear or not, I think it should be up to him. This is a rule change that had been talked about in the past, may change next year. Let me know what you guys think. And also let me know what you guys think about the rule change of a third-party review. So this has been going on for a couple years now because of the scoring system, the challenge system. The coaches throw the brick. They can challenge the call that the ref had. The refs can also review the call. So what happens normally? Well, in a normal match, let's say John Smith doesn't like the call that happened against Dayton Fix. He throws the challenge brick. Ref goes over, stops the match, goes over to the side of the match. And I know some people don't like that challenge anyway because it stops the momentum. Understandable. But the ref goes over to the side of the match, reviews the call himself, comes back out and says, call stands or call is reversed. What people want is a third-party review. So the third-party review would essentially be sending the wrestler, or the ref would come off the mat. He would send this call to a third party, to a box, who's essentially, he can be in a back room, he can be off site, who he then, or she, reviews the call and says whether the call stands or whether it's reversed. So it's not that same ref making that decision. It's up to the discretion of a third party. And this happens a lot in other sports already. It happens in the NFL. It happens in the MLB. It happens in college football. So why isn't this happening in college wrestling? Well, in some cases it actually is. So in some of the conference championships, there was a third-party review on site, and this is in the rule book right now. This is up to the discretion of the tournament, which that's kind of strange that it's up to the discretion of the tournament. And like conferences like the SoCon had the third-party review, but the national tournament doesn't. I'm not saying that this should be at every single tournament. I think it would get tedious at that point. But when you're in matches in the national championships and your whole career, your whole season lasts on that one call, I think that's when you need that third-party review. Let's look at the semifinals match, like Hayden Hidlay versus Jason Nolf, who that really came down to whether Hidlay got that takedown in the first period. And yeah, you could say Nolf could have came back, got the takedown later on. It would have changed momentum in his head, his game plan. But, Hidlay may be thinking, what does this ref know? What is he thinking? And same with the finals matches. When you're talking Yanni versus McKenna, was that a takedown that Yanni had in the finals, or did he not have it? Should McKenna have won that? Well, let's leave it up to the discretion of a third-party ref. The other thing that's nice about this is the ref on the mat, he'll still probably get booed, but it's less of a boo because he made the decision on the mat. But if he's backed up by another ref, by another third party, well, that makes a little bit more sense. So that's my take on that, and that's what I think. On to upcoming rule changes. Upcoming rule changes for next year were great, but let's talk about upcoming programs in 2020. So what new programs will be coming out next year? There are a couple of new programs slated to come out in 2019, 2020, all the way up until 2023. And I want to recommend this great article that FloWrestling put out talking about the upcoming programs as well as the growth of the sport. Make sure you check that out in the link below. And there right now, do you know how many wrestling programs there are? Well, there are 75 Division I wrestling programs. By next year, there will be 78. So which schools are being added, dropped? Let's talk about that. So, like I said, great article by Flo. Long Island University was one of the first schools. Right now, they are D2, and they are coming in. They're 7-11 this year in D2, and they went to a lot of open tournaments, duels, things like that. In the past year, they've wrestled a D1 program in Clarion, and you'll see what a lot of this stuff comes down to with joining D1 wrestling, having new programs, is there has to be a transitional period. So a lot of times schools don't just come out and have a D1 program all of a sudden. There are programs that do that, schools that do that, universities, but they'll go from D3 to D2 to D1, and there's a transitional period where they may not be able to wrestle the postseason for a couple years, but they're still able to wrestle the regular season, or they're able to wrestle a lower division postseason, as you see with a couple of these teams. But like I said, they have to make that transition. And so during that transition, they're able to wrestle D1 wrestling programs, just like Long Island did this past year when they wrestled Clarion. Now, they lost, and that's what you'll see a lot of times, but you need that time to adjust to that D1 caliber. Another new team is University of Arkansas at Little Rock. This is brand new. They're actually just putting up a training center. So like I said, some programs are brand new. Some come from D2, D3. This is a brand new program. Putting up the training center, should be around next year and transitioning into the new season. Another school is Presbyterian. They're in Clinton, South Carolina. There's Cal Baptist, who is the newest program to D1. They can't actually compete until 2023 because they're making that transition. This past year, they were 2-6, so they're still kind of wrestling around, but they wrestled some tough matches. Now, they did beat, notably, Cal Poly, who has a tough program, but they lost to Ohio State. I believe they got shut out. Number 2 team in the country versus a upcoming team from D2. Understandable. They lost to Stanford, but they did beat Drexel as well. So those were the 2 wins, Drexel and Cal Poly. You know, not a bad start of the year for Cal Baptist looking to join D1 Wrestling. Also, you have Augustana, who's an upcoming program for the upcoming years. So their new programs through 2023, you got Arkansas at Little Rock, who's joining next year. You have Presbyterian, also joining next year. Long Island, joining next year. And then you have Augustana, who's in South Dakota, currently D2, joining after that. And then Cal Baptist joining in 2023. So those are those programs that are able to wrestle in the postseason. And I think it's always great for the growth of the sport to see new D1 programs, 80 D1 programs by 2023. And I think that's great for college wrestling. And the last topic of the day, let's talk about these historic expansion for the MAC. So MAC, the Mid-Atlantic Conference, just expanded like crazy for this upcoming 2019-2020 wrestling season. Now, what happened? Well, 2 conferences essentially joined. The EWL joined the MAC to expand the wrestling conference to the 2nd biggest out of all college wrestling conferences. So the only one it's behind, I believe, is the Big Ten, which is the biggest and the most competitive. But this will for sure make the MAC a lot more competitive. So the new programs that are joining, you'll have Bloomsburg, Clarion, Edinburgh, Lock Haven, Ryder, George Mason, and Cleveland State. So they were all EWL teams. They're joining the MAC next year. Now, who are the current teams? Well, you have teams in there like Buffalo. You have Central Michigan, Kent State, Northern Illinois, Ohio, as well as, you know, you have Missouri, the Old Dominion, and SIU Edwardsville. So those are all those teams that are in the MAC now. Now, you smash these together, what's going to happen? So the current MAC champions are Missouri. Now, Missouri, typically in the SEC in college football, they're actually the current reigning 6-time conference champions in MAC, but they'll face some tough competition. You have Lock Haven coming in as the EWL champs. Now, how will those 2 programs spar off? How will they face off against each other? That will be very interesting to see, not only their schedules, but how the conference championship plays out, because we've seen Lock Haven do really well these past couple of seasons. Now they're losing Chance Marceller, who did really well for them the past couple of years, but they still have some solid talent and some guys that, you know, maybe they're in the PA area and don't want to leave PA, or they're, you know, they just want to go to a Lock Haven. They see the talent that's there. They see the success of the program. They want to go there. Well, that just helps the program grow, and that's why I think they can do really well against Missouri. Now, Missouri only had 1 loss this past season, and Lock Haven had a couple, but then we also have other programs that could do really well there, I really think. But let's look at allocations. So as far as conference allocations to the national tournament, this past year, the MAC had 27 qualifiers for nationals. The EWL had 14. So you combine that, you have 41 qualifiers. If that's the way that the national, you know, seeding committee decides to go about this, they may have up to 40 qualifiers, which could be pretty big. Now, how does that compare to the other conferences? Well, Big 10 has 78, Big 12 has 53. So if Big 12 is that big, and they're one of the biggest now, how will the MAC do now that has a lot more teams? Depends on how competitive it is, depends on where those guys rank up and seed up throughout the season, but it could be a pretty big expansion and very historic, and I'm excited to see where it takes college wrestling in the future. And that does it for this week's show. Make sure you guys subscribe so you are updated on all the upcoming wrestling news, tips, and lifestyle videos that I have coming out of the upcoming weeks. I put a lot of time into that, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy a lot of the videos that I have coming out. And as always, make sure you check out these upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.